My first question to you was, what is house music and what is house culture?
Okay.
Yeah.
House music is a music that I would say is multicultural. It's really, it depends on how the early roots can go anything from the 70s and move its way all the way up to now. But basically, a lot of it became done more in the, we got more we got more, notarized by being more coming into the more in the late 80s, but it's been going on before that. I mean, and basically we always have a toss up between New York and Chicago. Chicago saying we started it, New York saying we started it. Well, I could get in a debate with them, and it would probably be disappointing to know that, we basically, New York did kind of start it because we, clubs that were starting this kind of dance music kind of culture, and it morphed because in the 70s you have the time when a lot of black music was coming out. I'm talking about the beginning of it. It was the end. It was the soul music was important. Then it moved from soul music to funk music, which was James Brown, and then went from James Brown to people like Sly and the Family Stone, which was a more funk mixed with rock. Then it moved, and then you had a certain type of music that came in that were groups that made music, like Kool and the Gang, Earth, Wind and Fire, BT Express. Certain funk bands and groups were coming along where Prince was looking at this, and he was part of this genre too. He started, and this is why his music goes into that. And then what happens, it goes into I would say 75, from this is all 70s that we're talking about. Then it switches to 75, which is the start of disco. And disco was a time, again, when people were now, different races were now starting to, first it was, people of Latino, the Latino community was starting, doing this dance with with the music. And it got to be popularized in, I'd say 75, 74 really. And then 75. It got to be more of an urban dance, urban cultural dance. Like the hustle actually was that kind of gateway to it. Remember, there's a lot of other music genres was coming up. Like funk had branched out to a lot of freestyle dancing. They had influences from Soul Train, but not as much because that was the West Coast. New York had it where we were basically listening to, was dealing with having a thing called house parties that were going on in New York City, that were basically, you go to a friend's house, you listen to music, you dance to it. It was before clubs. And what it did was it went from, I would say, a point of being with your neighbors and your relatives, your friends in the neighborhood, to going out into the streets and seeing this in parks. The same people who were dancing in the parties down in the basements with, having parties, they moved, and you could see that energy out in a park environment or in a street environment. Now, as this was going on, it was interesting. It kind of branched off in two different directions. One direction went more into I'm skipping a little bit, and I want to go back a little bit, which means in 1975, when all the stuff we were talking about happened, and disco was happening, which was a more social and club-oriented dance that moved from moved from the basements to the streets, from the streets into the club, that became a fad. It got so much notoriety, and we talk about disco. It got so much of a notoriety of being a fad that it got over commercialized, and it started to be hated by certain people in the white culture, especially the rock culture, because for so long they had felt that it was American to be listening to rock music, but all of a sudden this disco was a mixture of gay, straight, black, white, Asian, if you need to. And they were worried about, why is it that we have to mix with everybody else? No. We wanna make it rock. Why can't we keep it that way? But they realized that their market was losing ground. So they had to, some DJ, I think it was in Cleveland, Ohio, do some homework on it. It was a DJ on a radio station who called and told most of his viewers, who were rock listening people, a station, that, you know what, I want you to bring all your disco records to Wrigley Field, and I want you to bring them in, and we're gonna have a bonfire, and we're gonna burn these disco records. So they were that prejudiced, that anti-hating of different cultures having different music other than the music they did, and they decided to make this protest. The protest got out of hand to a big old riot in a baseball field that became the death of disco. Now, during that time, you still had underground people dancing, freestyling, and this doesn't mean this was, and I mean like freestyling dancing. It could be anything from soul train dancing to whatever. And freestyling was just a dancing expression. It was just, there wasn't no initial steps. It was just whatever moves you came out with. What happened is those groups went different directions, and this is going into the 80s. So that means that end of disco was in 79, and then what happened is that disco got cut off, and certain people went underground. Disco went underground, and stayed and went into clubs like the Garage, was in the Loft, and even the Gallery, these were before all this disco and all this stuff happened. These clubs existed, but what happened is disco went underground. A certain amount of the dancers who didn't get a chance, who were younger, they didn't get to the clubs, they went another direction. One group went into the clubs, and the other group, they stayed in the streets. And the street ones became into hip hop. And the birth of hip hop started to come out in that direction. Plus, there was an issue in the Bronx where there was a lot of gangs, and that was a territorial gang riot, and you can see it in things. What was the movies? I think called the Rumble Kings. You can see movies like that will show how back in the 70s there were gangs, they were there, and they had so many gangs, and there was a very well-known movie called The Warriors that has it's a fictional but pretty true way that you look at the gangs that were in the Bronx and in Brooklyn and in Queens and Staten Island. And what happened is they were having issues with each other, and there was killings, and somebody got killed that shouldn't have been killed, and they realized they went to the truth, and they wanted to go and realizing we're killing each other. This is crazy. We gotta figure a different way. Afrika Bambaataa decided that he was going to bring those gangs together and bond them together. And and what happened is the instead of fighting, they took the fighting into the art. So what they did was the art went into everything from graffiti to dancing to DJing and MCing. And it got to be very popular. And MCing had been out for quite some time. It wasn't anything kind of new. MCing had been out since like 75 and 74. That came at the not the end of the bands, But yeah, it was the end of the bands when DJs kind of came in to get more notoriety. Um, and that was like in the mid 70s. Um, Going back to the 80s when it really was doing, like I said, a lot of the back to the kids in the that was in the hip hop in the early 80s and starting to see more of a what was going on with this new genre of people who were dancing to let's see this urban street dance that was like breaking and hip hop. It was this cool new trend. Then you had people who are into the rock, and this is in the 80s, people in the rock situation who really got more into a new form of music, and it was really punk that came out. The British came out with punk. And what happened is it turned into a punk and new wave. So in the 80s, you had like 3 different kinds of music, maybe more than that, very different genres coming out at the same time. And then you had the underground the disco going underground that stayed there, still had the soulfulness of disco, the soulfulness of soul music, the funk of all this stuff that went underground. These were going into clubs like I said before, like the Paradise Garage was a well-known club that was doing that. There was other clubs, so many clubs. Now, at that point in time, the disco clubs that closed had all these venues, all these other places open that were making money in the late 70s to early 80s that now needed to make more revenue. So what happened is they started to have more clubs. And these clubs were more dance clubs, just like disco, but they were dance clubs instead. And while you were in these clubs, you had there was a couple of DJs that you should know about. One is David Mancuso, who was the person who actually started a lot of this new music and different kinds of music that challenged the dancers' brains and put them to think outside the box. Not because you're Latin, you have to listen to Latin music. Not because you're Black, you have to listen to folk music. Not because it was where you added gospel, you added rock, you added jazz, you added reggae, you added all these different kinds of music at a venue where you were challenged to dance. And having that challenge to dance gave you, opened your mind in listening to the music, the whole song, not just it being blended into another song or overlapped with another song. It made you hear it. And, I talked about the Hoop with that person and the Loft, which I learned from. And then you have the Paradise Garage, which is Larry Levan, which is, I'm sorry, I have to skip that. You have to have Nicky Siano, which had a club called the Gallery. And the Gallery, that came really be after the Loft. And then you have another club, which is the Garage, which all those clubs learned from the Loft. And that time, you had a gentleman, which was Larry Levan, and he had a very good friend of his, and his good friend was named Frankie Knuckles, which people would say is, and he is the king of house music. Now, Chicago had a surgeon of dance music there too. It wasn't really labeled. Later on, it got to be labeled. So we were kind of listening to the same music, a little bit more electronic in Chicago, a little bit more soulful in New York. The blending of it all come together, the combining of them having to go into different clubs were great. But what happened is Chicago took that and realizing, let's run with that. And they asked Larry Levan, who was playing at the Paradise Garage, to join and come to Chicago to play. But Larry Levan didn't want to leave his home in New York City because the Paradise Garage was a gay club which gave gay men of color and women of color a venue to dance and explore the music, and be comfortable with the sexuality in a club. And what happened is when when Larry Levan was asked to go to Chicago, he said, "I can't do that." So he said, "But you can ask my good friend, Frankie Knuckles." So Frankie Knuckles went in his place, which came out with all the new stuff, all the stuff that we've been listening to from David Mancuso, from Nicky Ciano, from Larry Levan. Frankie he has brothers, his friends were those DJs that were giving that music. So when Frankie Knuckles went out there and he showed Chicago another soulful side of it, they were in shock. And he then became like the poster, the king of house music. House music has been a it's still a dance of people of color. It still embraces people of all colors and nationalities. It's not like, well, you listen to reggae, so you have to be a Jamaican. Or you listen to salsa and you really kind of have to at least speak Spanish. It was, or you have to be in hip hop, so you have to be black to do it. It was more of a music that everybody got into. And a lot of the people who were in the hip hop dancers actually were going to hip hop clubs and was dancing hip hop, but they were feeling a little bit, didn't feel as comfortable as they should have been. So when they bumped into house music, as the genre came out, they realized they were accepted with open arms. They go, "Hey, you're dancers. Hey, you're showing us new stuff. We appreciate that." Which and a lot of hip hop dancers, a lot of breakers, and everybody else, a lot of dancers switched to house music because it's a much more communal. We're much more loving. We have a spiritual side to us. We have a rhythmic side to us, very rhythmic by listening to the music. And we're just not listening to the bump, the beat, 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 beat. We're listening to the guitars. We're listening to the bass to it. We're listening to the horns to it. We're listening to the vocals to it. All those parts are part that, as a dancer, you should use your body, which is an instrument, and express it with all the other instruments. A lot of people take it for granted that house music is just boom, 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 boom. That might be part of the heart, but the rest of the melody and everything else is your soul. And watching how this transition of things happen, I'm very, we as in the house community, since it was so underground, it never became pop. Now there is a certain pop part of it that you see when you hear nothing but boom, 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 boom. When you see people watching DJs like they get ready to levitate, like it's an actual show, but no one knows how to communicate with each other and dance. House is that communication with dance. If you're a house dancer, you should learn to dance with somebody, learn to connect or exchange with someone to understand the fullness of the house community and how the house philosophy is. I appreciate the newer generation and what they do, but I see there is a lack of getting down deep and understanding the philosophy of it. If I want to learn the hula, I don't learn it from a place in New York, which I can too. But sometimes you have to go to Mecca, you have to go to Hawaii, you have to go and see the people, you have to go ahead and understand the culture, what you eat, how do you dress, what's sacred to you, what's important to you, what's not important to you. Before you decide to say, hey, I'm a house dancer, I'm just going to go ahead and do something, you just can't cut those things. So, I'm sorry, I'm going off in all different, directions, but I hope I'm, answering some of your questions, when you ask that question.
No, this is it's actually great because you actually are beginning to answer my second question, right? Which is how what you see has changed. And then this is a conversation I've had also like with other, house dancers that's been the scene for a while,
Mhm.
is how, and then this is actually Ray was the first one that actually told me this, right? Like was like, so he was the first one to who like brought me to the club. I was like more like I'm in the studio, and then I would go to like the first club party I went to
So
was
you talk about Voodoo Ray.
Voodoo Ray, yeah.
Okay,
So,
good. I just
yeah.
want to
So
make
the
sure.
first party I went to was Ejo's. It was back in Sinsin, Soulgasm in Sinsin.
I've been to Simpson.
Right. So then that's when I, where I met Voodoo Ray and like Link, and they were like, yeah, you gotta just come to Toka Tuesday with us. Then that's when I pretty much just found out like I don't know anything.
Ah, surprise.
And then I was like, and I remember Link was the one who was like, you call yourself a hip hop dancer, but you don't freestyle.
Uh-huh, uh-huh, uh-huh.
Right.
Because
But I was like, you give me 5, 6, 7, 8, I'll do it.
yes,
Like,
yes, 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 yes.
and then so it's been a journey, but I think it's definitely like, and then that's like Voodoo Ray is the one that's like that told me the same thing, like house is about connecting, don't worry about your step,
Yeah, yeah,
like
yeah.
don't worry about what you're doing, like just do you, like you got a step because you can dance, you have rhythm, you can dance, but
Yes,
you have to connect. Yeah, so that was like the connecting part definitely is like the one thing, the first thing I learned, I think, in house music.
yes, yes. That's a very important factor to it. I
Yeah.
think, people just take it for granted. It's the steps, it's the movements, and you look in the mirror and you see if you get this done right and this is hand right. It's like, and I'm gonna go to Ray real quick. I met Ray back in '88. Um, I took him to the loft.
Okay.
Marjorie went to the loft. She went to the one before, to the last part of the loft in, I'd say, 88, 87. Okay. Um, and I knew I had met Ray, I met Ijo, I met Chris, I met Sekou. Those are the cats that I met. Their friends were Link. Their friends were was Stretch. It was a journey seeing these kids that I saw when they first came in that were, had this lovely energy, and some of them had African names because it was that they were born in an era where black, being black was very important. So you had an African name that was attached to you, and now they listen to music that their mothers and fathers listen to. So in the back of their brain, no matter what their music they learned in their time, they always got hit in their head with the music that they heard from their parents, and now gets a chance to dance to it. So, when I had met, Ray and Ijo and all of them, that energy that they had was in my community of dancing, of the loft and the garage and everything else. That which didn't have a name to it. We call it club music that we listened to. So, and any style you did was like a freestyle kind of thing. We looked at these, we looked at, and this is interesting. We looked at them as like the newer generation, and we always felt um, that we always passed on the torch in a way without giving actual the torch. We appreciate you're there. We appreciate your energy, but understand it's communal. Understand that you're vibing with somebody and you're connecting with somebody, and that's the only way you can do that and feel this kind of music. It turned into um, uh, performance. It turned into teaching. It turned into um, uh, uh, competition would turn into battles. I think you can battle or compete with a lot of different genres, but I always feel it feels uncomfortable when I see people in house battling, because when you battle, the word battle is an attack, and house is a family thing. So how do you how do you battle your brother or your sister? Kind of like, kind of doesn't feel right. Now there's a part and this is, I will say, the cipher, which some people used to say it's a circle, because that's what you saw, a circle, a man-made circle. My generation, people might say, well, I see pictures where you guys were all standing around watching one person dancing, so it must be the cipher. It's like, no, it wasn't that way. When you're a dancer and you're putting a certain amount of energy, your peers and other dancers understand, give that person room to express their feelings. Now it can be interpreted that, oh, you guys just started and then we're gonna get in after you got in, and you're gonna get in after you get in to show you our moves, or express who we are as a dancer. This is what I've learned in this class, and this is what I learned from this, and this is what I learned from that, and this is what I come to bring to the table, which is a beautiful thing. But it gets confused to the person outside of the circle or outside of the cipher, because the people inside the cipher are doing the actions and showing the performance and doing the stories of who they are, and the ones that are on the edge of the cipher are the ones who can't wait to get in for their time to get in. And then you have the other ones who are, who admire the dance, but look at it as a show. And then you look at the other part of the ring, which are the people who dance too, but now their dance space is taken away by the cipher. Everyone has each ring has a different story. House has always been this, there's no arena. There's no arena that you make man-made. It's about the energy you have. I told a good friend named Yaya, I said, when you're a good dancer, when you can dance on the corner and have people looking at you, watching what you're doing, appreciating what you're doing, seeing that private moment of your feelings and your emotions come out, and you're dancing from the corner of the room, not from the center stage, not from the platform that's made by your peers, but it's done by the energy that you have as a human being. And the magic of a house party is looking at all parts of the room, not just the center of it that is man-made and then evolves outwards. It's what's outside that comes into the circle that should bring that energy in. I'm proud for many years of my life, and I'm 63, and I'm still active. I still dance with the best of them. Am I better than a lot of them? No, but I'm different. And I've seen, and when I dance with a person from the younger generation, I actually can see where they came from. Not just their nationality. The nationality, the music they listen to, that they grew up with, because their rhythm changes. They dance more to the music when it's one of those things. And then, because it has a certain attachment of experience that makes it happen. You can go through the motions all you want to. When you have a certain experience off of a song, off of experience that you had off of a person you danced with, that is something that brings a whole nother dynamics to the dance. You know, you can go to an audition. This example, when people I see that are professional dancers that are dancing for Broadway or, you know, or whatever, or ballet or tap or modern or whatever, and they go to go for an audition to join a company or group or performance. Sometimes you have, you know, the director might say, the choreographer say, I want you to dance this, I want you to dance this piece. And he's choosing from maybe 5 people. And he looks at some of the people and says, you do exactly the way, you know, you do it right, you do it right, you do it right, but you do it differently, but you'd still do it right. But the way you do it differently shows your own personality. And maybe that choreographer says, I want that difference of it. You know, I want to hear it a different way. I want to, and then, because then you know, the dancer is interpreting the choreographer's music and movement to bring out a human part of it. It's so interesting to see the dancer bringing their soul out into a piece that's only theirs. It's not somebody else, because everybody has a different dancing style. Like people have fingerprints. It's all different, you know. But what happens is you see students, when I would dance and see new people dancing, I could see their pattern where they got their stuff from. I can see, oh, that's Ejo's style. That's Khalif's style. That's Sakud's. That's Tony McGregor's. That's Marjorie's arms. That's, you know, I can see that. And I can see by their patterns. I can see they put all these little pieces together like alphabets to make a word. But they're not making, you know, and they're making sentences, but they're not making the book. And the book is what the music brings to you, because you're supposed to dance and interpret from the music.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. And then I think that's definitely like, it's been my challenge too, right? It's like having, and at one point I'm just like, okay, that there's so much to just taking classes, and then sometimes you just have to dance. You just gotta do it to the music, and even, you know, even your own room. And then I think the biggest lesson I learned was actually after my kid was born. You know, so we will have like, so even today, so every day we have dance sessions together. And then he does whatever he does. And then sometimes I'm like, hey, let me show you this move. He's like, no, you don't know my move.
Exactly. You don't know my move. This is me. This is me being me.
Yeah, he's like, you don't know my move. So he doesn't want to learn any of my move, but he will watch and he will pick up stuff and then he would like turn it into his. And what I remember when he was like 1.5, I think, like right before he turned 2, because he would come to rehearsals with us, you know, and then he just picked up this contemporary floor piece. And then I didn't realize he actually remembered the choreography, because he just sat there and he was doing his thing. Right. He came home and then I was like, that's my choreo, but you reinterpreted it and we're dancing to Motown. So, and I'm like, and then he went, Mama's dance. So he's, you know, so I was like, oh, so that's when I learned. I'm like, sometimes it's not just about like drilling the steps over and over and over again so I can look like my teachers, but it's about like finding my step. And it's like, and knowing that, you know, my body is different from, say, Kuz, from Marge's. Like, we're not going to move the same way.
And your range of movements and your rhythm to certain parts of your body is like that too.
Yeah. So it's like, it's interesting that, like, you know, it takes dancing with a 1.5-year-old to like help me just open my eyes, like, oh wow, I can actually just dance like me.
Well, I'm gonna tell you something about that. We back at when I went to the loft, and this was back in 81, 82. It was an after hours club that started at midnight and went to maybe even at the latest 3 o'clock or 2 o'clock in the afternoon. So we're talking about over 12 hours of music. So it was time to explore and experiment. But what happened is that there was a lot of dancers that had children. A few had children. And it was hard for them to go out at night, but who's going to watch the child? They have a responsibility, they're parents. But what happens is, at the loft, parents would get there at maybe 8 o'clock in the morning, bring their kids like they're going to the park. We're gonna go party. So they would go and bring their kids into the party. There was balloons all over the place, a festive, happy birthday kind of attitude. The other dancers were like adopted uncles and aunts who watched the kids, but played with them. And the kids were then able to see the parents in a light that put them in an equal playing field. Because most of the time, in a child's eyes, he sees his parent to only tell them, you can do this, you can't do this. You can do this, you can't do this. You can't do this, you can't do this, you can't do this. But now, they can do these things because their parents are doing these things. And their parents now are not the disciplinarians. They're playing like the child is. They're having fun. And they see other people having fun. So it's an experience of the child saying, this is a safe area. My God, everybody's having fun. Big kids are having fun. Big adults are having fun. I'm having fun. We're having fun. That memory sticks in some of those kids. And it's the thing about experience. An experience that your son had of watching you do this while he's doing other things. Because when you're a child, you're learning everything, how to walk, how to talk to people, how to listen to respect you, how to manipulate you, how to do all these little things. Their mind is going. So you never sleep on a child because he or she is listening to what you're doing. So, that experience of him doing that grows him to be the person he is. Now, whatever he gets out of it, he might not be a dancer, but he might be a musician off of it. He might not be that, but the arts are all visual. The arts is all doing. So whatever he's going to do, just give him the tools, stand back, and give him more experiences for him to pick out what he wants to do and what he feels comfortable with. And that's why the house community was completely different than I look at because you know what you need to do? You need to bring him out to more, hopefully, when this gets to be understood how we can do this, outdoor events where he can see other children, where he can actually see other people doing that to do that. But I think you've already gave him certain foundation by him watching while mommy's at work.
Yeah, and we go to like Soul Summit and stuff, so like he's been to Soul Summit with me, like so he knows. And then the whole thing what you said about like uncles, and aunts, it's the same thing, right? Like when my company goes on tour, he goes on tour. So his uncles and aunties, and then it was so funny. And the last time we went on tour, he just started dancing with like like with classic, he does flexing. So he's like picking up flexing, and he was like, no, now show me I'm gonna show you my move. So they started like going back and forth just on the street. so yeah, I see that, and then it's interesting for me because I came from, my first style is hula. So hula is very structured because it came as like it's a very religious dance. It's a ritual dance.
Yes.
Right. And then it became entertainment, and when Elvis popularized it, it was a whole other thing. Yeah. But yeah, and then I got into ballet. So it's all the studio styles.
Right. And you have your home thing that you have, and then you have your trained in. Go ahead.
Right. So, so it took like, I'm still definitely learning. And sometimes I feel like even when I freestyle, I'm thinking about freestyling. And it's funny because I'm like, why am I thinking so hard about dancing? Right. But when I dance with my son and it's just us dancing, and then I think that was the moment when I learned, I was like, wow, I don't need to think about this.
You don't need to think about it. You don't need to think. And it's interesting when I see people in studios doing house or whatever, I see this intensity being intensive, trying to figure out and get the moves right, or getting the footwork right, or doing, it's not about that. You might learn it and try to get the footwork and everything else, the patterns right, but it's up to you to explore it and take it to another level. Because now it's part of your new alphabet. So you need to be able to use it and change it, like your son did. He's like, hey, why can't I? See, the thing is that, sometimes as we get to become more adults, we start to realize there's rules and we have to stick to those rules. And there's a certain point that you can actually change those rules up.
Right.
One rules you can do, and one's freedom is there, and know the difference.
Right.
And when you said about, and in your traditional dance and how you came up and how you've evolved in who you are and look at different things differently and look at things, how you take the hula and it's how I take house. It's something that I grew up with rock, with soul, funk, jazz, disco, Latin music, all those put all together. But my heart is house, which has that soul, that no one, you didn't. There was no rules. But what happened is you could see how people act to understand what the rules are. When you go to a person's house, or if I went to a place, if I went to Hawaii and I went to a person's house who was Hawaii, Polynesian, and I wanted to figure out, I don't make it, when I go into the house, I don't change the rules of their house. I watch, I listen, I respect to the elders, I give them homage, I give them respect, and I learn what I should learn from them. But sometimes the newer generation in this house community decide we don't really want to have to worry about that. We are faster, quicker, more powerful. We have more power moves. We have more this and that and the other. And they take that same hip hop mentality and bring it to house, which it shouldn't be done. You have a question about that?
Yeah, sorry, I forgot to unmute myself.
No. I want to hear what you thought. When I said that, you kind of got very quiet and stuff was coming out of you. What do you feel about what I just said?
It's interesting because in our last conversation we talked about it, right? Like how now everything's about that instant gratification, social media, and everyone can be called a master.
Yes.
Once you reach a certain amount of followers, then you are a master. and then I'm thinking, I'm thinking because with and then something that this is conversation I have a lot with like my dancers with Sekou and everybody. And like I came from a culture where the respect for elders is ingrained. Right. So hula is the backbone of the culture. It's the resilience, the resistance that revived an entire culture that was oppressed and being wiped out. It was banned. People were being thrown in prison for dancing the hula, speaking the language. Right. So for hula to even be taught in the 80s when I was growing up, it was a whole renaissance, like a group effort. It was activism. So respecting your elder, it's passing down your culture and lineage, right? And then even me as a non-native Hawaiian person, it's like me going in, it's the same thing. You go to other people's house, it's another culture, and they are welcoming you in, then you have to respect it. So that's how I grew up. So when I came to house, and I didn't really start going into the house like clubs until like the early 2000s, which is pretty late, you know. But I still saw the difference from like say even when Funkbox was at Sullivan Room to Funkbox when it was at Le Poisson Rouge.
Yes.
Right? And then you see the dancing change, right? And then for me, that's why I was like trying not to laugh when you say like the younger generation, because I'm like, you see that, and then
Yeah.
sometimes I know I'm the younger generation.
But,
um
but maturity is changing of that. You see, I put younger generation as how much knowledge you have sometimes, because there are
mhm,
young people who understand that and actually don't do those other things. And we have to look at those too. I mean, some are, some of that younger generation doesn't know, some of it does know, and some don't care. And you have to know those things. Like if I was giving a house class, I'd ask everyone in the room to do me a favor, and we have a first exercise, and the exercise would be to close your eyes, and I would ask you certain questions. I want you to raise your hand. Now, the reason why I ask these people to close their eyes is because I don't want them to be influenced by their peers on the answers.
right.
So what I would ask them is, okay, how many people are here because it's a cool thing and it's really great to do this kind of dance. You like this house music dance, and then I might ask, okay, so how many people at the end of this, how many people want to become teachers? How many people want to be in battles? How many people want to this is just a mild stepping stone to know a new style of dancing with the rest of your hip hop and the rest of your other repertoire of dancing that you want to. I like to find out why they're there.
Mm.
Understand, are they taking? Are they taking and putting in? Contributing? I want to know what their purpose is. If they say, well, I'm here to learn the different moves so I can go ahead and be better in the battle, I will say, you shouldn't take my class. Here's some money back. Because I realize that's not what this is about. House is not. If you want to find and understand house, you have to understand the feeling. And it might have to tap into you as a person more than and how you should act and how the culture is and how it is to communicate with a group of people that are trying to be on the same level, which means they are learning to give. Because house is a giving, really giving. Where you look at hip hop, sometimes it can be a taking, it could be a commercial, it could be a, it's like me. I'm showing you I got shit. I'm showing you that I'm, marketable. It's kind of like selling your personality more than, letting out your soul and being comfortable in your skin to do that. Instead of mimicking to say, oh, see, I can do the move like so-and-so. I can do the move like so-and-so. It's not about doing the move like, your peers. It's about actually feeling, because when I see all these copies, I'm disappointed in the way they do it, because the execution looks like pieces. And I'd like to see if they actually listen to the music so they could dance to it, so I'll know they actually hear it, and I can see their personality. I know
Yeah.
I went off a little bit.
This was all related. I do have to go so my
Yeah.
husband can go back to work.
Sweet.
But thank you so much for your knowledge, and I recorded it, and we'll most likely post it in a couple of weeks.
Okay.
Um,
I hope I was able
yeah,
to help.
no, it was definitely helpful and a very important conversation, and I think it's also so relevant and timely to what's going on. Talking about multiculturalism, talking about respecting each other's culture, is especially when you're being welcomed in, right? And then how to coexist peacefully.
Mm-hmm.
And then the idea of house having that giving energy. And I think that's very important. Like, I think having that giving energy is so important to even to understand and embrace each other. Um, and that's definitely like the one thing I've taken away from house, like and yeah, I feel it because like, hip hop and house to me is like they're like cousins, but
Yes.
polar opposites. Like in hip hop, I feel like gotta be like, I go hard. I need
Yeah,
like
yeah,
this
yeah. Because
masculine
it's the attitude,
energy.
it's the feeling to it.
Yeah,
With
and
it,
then yeah, and then in the house, it's like you said, it's like the to me, it was my church. It was like
yes.
it's like you feel that spirit, and you're connected with yourself. And
And you
sometimes,
love
honestly, I'm like, right. A lot of time, I'm like, I don't want to like be in a circle. I don't. It's not, it's not. And sometimes it's not like I don't want to dance with other people. It's like sometimes I want to be in that corner so I can just move by myself.
your thing. You know yourself. You have that right to have that privilege to
Yeah.
have your own energy, your own world, and bring it out. Because unless you do you, you shouldn't be doing somebody else. I mean,
Hmm.
unless you love yourself, you shouldn't. You know, how do you love somebody else? You need to love yourself so then you can love somebody. Because then if you don't, you want that person to fill in that void. You have to know yourself. You have to find yourself and bring yourself out, and then you add yourself with the rest of the collective and show that love. And they have to be willing to understand that too.
Yeah, that's like a whole other conversation to unpack.
Yes, we can talk for days. We can talk for days.
We'll need another interview with you for sure.
Yes, please, I was going to ask you that. If you need me for another one, please don't hesitate. We can do this anytime you want to, next week, the next 2 weeks, whatever you want to do, whichever's easy to add, to track, whatever you want to do, I can do that. All right. My purpose as an elder is to go ahead and give you as much information about the culture as I possibly can within my soul. And it's not about commercial values. It's not about, I don't get paid for this. I don't want. It's not about fame. It's not about anything like that. It's about giving back to my community.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you
Thank you. Thank you so much.
for
All right.
sharing. Have a good day.
Thank you. Thank you.
Enjoy the weather.
Well, you do the same thing. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
All right.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.